Having just left Todmorden railway station, I'm heading towards Fielden Square. A historic part of town. You can see the Golden Lion Inn, which has quite a bit of history to it. Fielden Square being named after the Fielden family, who were, for a century or two, the major employers in this town, being the cotton mill kings. I believe the Fieldens originated a little bit further up the valley, closer to Walsden, which lies between Todmorden and Littleborough. In keeping with this valley's tradition of religious nonconformism, the Fieldens were Quakers originally. Oh dear. Well, I was going to take a little tour into the church grounds, but looks like they're permanently locked. Oh well, temporarily and reluctantly locked. But this is Todmorden Unitarian Church. I'll hopefully get a view of it a little bit higher up. But I mentioned that the Fieldens began as Quakers. And then at some point, they converted or gravitated towards being Unitarians. And the church that I was going to take a tour, at least of the grounds, is a magnificent structure, a Unitarian church built in the 1860s, when the Fieldens were at the height of their power and influence in the town. I remember in the late 70s and early 80s, this was still an active church with an active congregation coming out here for Sunday walks and so on. I remember it being used for services. I'm not sure when it closed. Possibly in the late 80s, possibly because the upkeep of this building was so great and the congregation for a Unitarian church was dwindling, and that combination meant it was just economically not possible. Thankfully, can we see through the trees a wonderful spire. Thankfully it was subject to a preservation order, grade 1 listing, and a trust, a charitable trust, is now in charge of the upkeep. So hopefully the church will be around for some time to come, even though it's not active. I notice here we have a little gateway opening into the cemetery. So again, you get an idea of the sheer scale of the Unitarian Church and the height of that spire. It's quite magnificent. It says something about the wealth and grandeur of the Fieldens and the cotton industry in general in the mid 19th century. So having left behind the Unitarian Church, and I mentioned the Fieldens being originally Quakers, we can see here behind me a Quaker burial ground, which also has a Fielden connection, and that's dating to 1668. So that's not long after the Restoration, really. when Charles II, the Merry Monarch, was back, and the Quakers already had a burial ground at this part of Deum. I think today, one of the primary perils, it's around 3 or 4 Celsius, and there is quite a fierce north or northwesterly wind that's going to make life a little bit awkward on the tops. I think more than that, it's going to make filming a little bit awkward too, especially with the GoPro, which seems to be very sensitive to wind noise. I fashioned a crude windbreaker using a microphone sponge, thanks to Nathan for that idea. But I still think that when I get out there with no trees to break the wind, any audio might be unusable. If that's the case, I'll overdub some commentary at home. Silent movies kind of thing. So having left the Shepherd's Skyline Inn, I'm now striking up over the moors on a very distinct track, heading to Gaddings Dam. Heavy rain yesterday has made it quite slippery underfoot, but as I said a little earlier, it's not uncomfortably cold yet. We'll have a little twirl. And on we go. Now, as expected, the wind is quite fierce here as I am approaching Gaddings Dam. This audio might not be usable. I might have to overdub some of the commentary. I'm trying to keep it close to my body and block as much wind as possible. It's quite a blustery northwesterly. You can see some stone steps ahead. There are 2 flights of stairs. We will take this one. And what do we have? We have Gaddings Dam. Could that be sound ahead? Could this be a beach? Yes, the grand claim of the highest beach in the country. route not to go to the water's edge. Onto the sandbank, and oh, that's a bracing 2 or 3 degrees, I think. So will I change into my swimming costume and do a couple of lengths? I'll pause the camera and see you later. Oh, so after my invigorating swim, I'm now at the other set of stone stairs, climbing up to the other side of Gaddings. Gaddings Dam dates to the 1830s. It was built as a supply dam for the Lumbert's cotton mills, and those were water-powered mills rather than steam, which obviously came later. I think it was in the 1830s that Gaddings was built to supply those mills, and once again it was part of the Fielden Empire, so we keep connecting to them. I'm not sure what the wind's going to do to the commentary here, but I will do a little circuit. You should see Studley Pike. And on we go. Connected with the Old Pack Horse route that runs between Cragvale and Mankinholes, and once we get past these slightly waterlogged sections on the other side of the gate, we'll get to our third point of interest, which dates from medieval times and connects to the network of corpse roads that were created at that time. That was when there was population expansion and the number of churches and congregations increased. But many of the new churches didn't have burial rites, they didn't have hallowed ground, so it involved corpses being transported from some of the new churches either by hand or via some kind of horse assistance to churches which could bury with full rites. And here what we have is the Deum Stone. The inscription Deum Laudamus, which is something like we praise thee God, and it's believed that, as well as being some kind of a boundary stone marking the sort of the summit of the road, it was also, if you see the flat top there, used as a coffin resting stone for when people had carried from one valley to the other, because if it was carried by, say, 4 men, they'd need a few rests here and there. So yeah, the Deum Stone. Now I shall begin this descent towards Cragvale, and we'll carry on the commentary a little later. There are a few spots of drizzle in the air as I descend on the what I would call the waterworks, the waterboard access road to Cragvale. It's not terribly cold. I think still it's around 3 Celsius. For a change today I'm wearing a fleece jacket, a Helly Hansen from I think about 1990, which at the time it's the early days of fleece in many respects. Fibre pile had been the king in the 70s and 80s, and the early fleece materials were very thin and they couldn't stop even at the slightest of breezes. But then by the middle 80s, late 80s, companies were making a more dense fleece material that could block some wind, and that made a huge difference to their usefulness outside. So yeah, I think this jacket, I think I bought it in around 89 or 90, and it's seen quite a bit of service. This is Cragvale proper. That was the historic Hinchcliffe Arms. And soon we'll be able to see church at Cragvale. One of the few Anglican Protestant churches in the area, given the history of nonconformism. Apologies for the excessive movement there. That gate was quite a tricky one. So I'm heading for Slate Delf's Hill, which is on a high section of moorland around 1200 feet, and that sits between Cragvale, Ripponden and the higher moors of Blackstone Edge, which separate Yorkshire from Lancashire. You can see the sun is giving us a nice illuminated Studley Pike. You might, behind me, be able to see electricity pylons near the top of Blackstone Edge and the White House Inn. What do we have? You can see brick bunker with earth surrounding it. Let's get over there. We'll get out of the wind and see what we've got. This bunker dates to the Second World War and was part of what they called a starfish decoy system, which involved building ditches of petrol, ditches of incendiary devices on top of the moor here. And when the German night bombers were coming, they would receive the signal, and from this control booth they'd light the flash pans and trigger a decoy, hoping that the bombers would release their load. Somewhere harmless on top of the moors and not bomb something strategic like the railway yards or one of the big cities. You can see that we're not the first people to have come here. It's sadly become something of a rubbish dump now. But 2 rooms, there's nothing left in the way of control gear or anything like that. But you can only imagine what it must have been like. So, Slate Delf's the bunker. I'll pick somewhere slightly fresher and I shall have a coffee. Something to eat. I've got around, what does it say? 9 miles. So I'm around 1100 feet now, on a bridleway, or let's say an unmetalled road, heading for Mytholmroyd. I have a train at, I think it's 1:35, and the time now is about 12:37, so a full hour. I think that's quite easy. So far the GoPro battery is holding up a lot better. One of my theories this time, I haven't connected the GoPro app from my phone to the camera, and I have a feeling that that was hammering the battery even more than the cold. I think all that toing and froing on Bluetooth was draining the camera battery, because the app itself allows you to both control the camera and to preview the shots. It gives you information such as battery, state of the battery, all that kind of thing. So that refreshing and updating communication, I think, was taking its toll on the battery. I'll do a little pan. Apologies if this audio is completely unintelligible because of the wind. Let's have a look around. Not bad at all for a Sunday lunchtime stroll, is it? For the 5th of December. I have about 3/4 of a mile, I think, to get me to Mytholmroyd station. The Strava suggests that will be around a 13-mile walk, which for a Sunday isn't too bad, I don't think. Conditions have been remarkably favourable. Yes, the wind has been a little bit awkward, and I don't know what it's into the audio, we'll find out. I'm happier with the way the GoPro's performed this time. I think using it without the app is the best way, for what I'm doing at least. And so for this points of interest walk, I'll say goodbye for now.